Welcome back. You're watching SA Today with me, Imraan Buccas. Let's take you back now to our leading story. The ANC has lambasted the DA for its messaging on its local government election posters in Phoenix, north of Durban. Now, the party is being accused of fueling racial divisions in the community of black and Indian residents in the area. It has also blamed the ANC for the situation. At the height of the unrest that ravaged parts of KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng in July, the area was reportedly in the grip of racial tensions that resulted in the deaths of over 30 people, mainly black people. Now let's discuss this. We joined via Zoom by political analyst Dr. Imraan Buccus. Dr. Buccus, thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
Thanks, Unati. Thanks for having me.
Now, perhaps before we get into the Phoenix matter, I just want an overall picture of what we are currently seeing in terms of, the campaigns. I mean, this has been a different kind of election, isn't it? As the country goes to the polls, we're going under very different circumstances, rather difficult. What's your take on the electioneering we are seeing, these past couple of months?
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely differently. I think besides COVID, there's also the reality that there isn't any electoral campaigning money. So it really means that parties can't do what they usually do and have had to resort to virtual rallies. And I think when you go the virtual route, it's really difficult to demonstrate mass support. Door-to-door has become really risky. It's unsafe. And then it raises the question of whether are we as a developing society ready to take on social media campaigning. We might well hear there's a saturation of smartphones, particularly amongst young people, and it's vastly different from perhaps the previous election. But also the social media campaigning has not been efficient, and I think the idea that door-to-door campaigning on the ground is still the most viable option for South Africans. So I think, despite the fact that we are a young country and increasingly social media savvy, I don't think parties have necessarily taken advantage of that. So campaigning has been dismal. I mean, if you just look around you, we don't see the usual number of posters that we see even from the ANC. So it really is a different campaign this year, and I would guess a very different election this year.
Now, as campaigning is heating up, opposition parties often criticize the ruling party. The DA has also, rightly so, come under fire for, fueling racial tensions. Some saying the party is actually weaponizing race in the country. The latest, and particularly the one in Phoenix, the matter in Phoenix, where, the posters of the DA are reading, the ANC called you racist. The DA calls you heroes. I mean, just those pictures and those posters alone in a part of Durban that was, that has seen racial tension leading to more than 30 people dying, some innocent people who were just bystanders, during the unrest, mainly black people. Now, is the party, the DA, as inclusive as they claim to be, or are they simply just tone deaf?
Well, I think they're certainly not inclusive, and I don't think they are making any effort to be seen to be inclusive. I think this is a very different democratic alliance from a few years ago. We're seeing a dramatic shift to the right, almost a kind of Steve Bannon type campaigning, and it seems like a party that's shamelessly exploiting people's pain for short-term gains. There are deep divisions in our society. We are a highly fragmented society. What emerged initially as a food riot and later escalated into, a kind of riot that was politically manipulated, and then seeing the deaths of scores and scores of people. And yet we see the DA shamelessly exploiting it. I think the DA is becoming unapologetically a party that's aiming for primarily the white vote, and it seems to a large extent the Indian minority vote. The DA is a party that did really well in the last election in Phoenix. There might be some concerns about the inroads that the IFP and perhaps independents are making. They know the ANC is a spent force in Phoenix despite its campaigning. So the DA seems to be going out of its way to capitalize on people's pain. Perhaps the other point that needs to be made, I think, from an ANC perspective, is that, you know, while they are increasingly more and more independents and the IFP playing a role in Phoenix, some parties might be hoping that the IFP and the independents go a long way towards splitting the DA vote. So, you know, the DA is doing all it can. And I think it comes as no surprise, right? This is the kind of policy articulation that we've seen coming from the likes of Gwen Ngwenya and others in the Democratic Alliance. It's a party that's certainly not aiming to be inclusive.
I mean, one would imagine, and like you rightfully say, it does come as no surprise if you look at historically how the party has even been treating its black leaders, and some of the things that are playing out in social media between former leaders of the DA who happen to be black and current leaders of the DA who happen to be white. Now, one would imagine that the party, like the DA, and including its history, you know, would understand how deep-rooted racism is in the country. And in light of what you've just said in terms of, you know, the fact that they really are playing on the hearts and the pain of the people, is the party not in fact contravening or in contravention of the electoral code of conduct? Many parties, as we know, have signed that code of conduct just recently.
Well, yeah, there certainly could be incitement, and I guess we would need a strong legal opinion. My own view would be it would be valuable to test in the court of law because it might be seen as stoking racial emotion. At the same time, the DA might very well argue that they haven't contravened the electoral code. And, you know, we've seen other parties like the EFF and others, you know, using the race card and using racism a lot more. And may well argue that there's nothing libelous about it, and they have not been calling the people of Phoenix racist and have just been quoting other parties. But my view would be that this might be valuable to test in a court of law. You know, we really seem to be moving in a dangerous direction in our country. We've been hoping that we move towards a culture of non-racialism, you know, a kind of society that we've been hoping to attain. But we see more and more race-baiting politics. We see more and more racialized politics, identity politics, not only when it comes to local government elections, but I think just broadly in South African society. And I think, you know, many of the big names in South African history that have wanted us to be moving towards a non-racial society would really be turning in their graves.
Dr. Buccas, I'd like us to shift focus now to the IEC. I mean, we spoke about just how different these elections are currently. And I mean, the IEC has come under criticism from various parties, you know, initially, and even having their integrity, you know, being put under the spotlight, and the IEC's integrity also being said that it is, you know, compromised. Just today, Action SA accusing the Independent Electoral Commission of deliberately trying to frustrate its efforts to participate in the local government election. So my question really to you, is the IEC's integrity compromised?
Well, I think a number of parties will have a number of issues that they want to bring about the IEC to the fore. But I think what we need to remember broadly is that this IEC is celebrated across the continent and the world, and it's an electoral commission that has done well since '94. So I think despite the attempts to, you know, punch holes in the integrity of the IEC, I think the IEC continues to be an organization that holds integrity, and I'm hoping it stays that way. If there are issues that are being raised about the IEC, I hope, you know, all of the proper channels are used to address them. But I think the IEC is something that we should continue to respect and continue to celebrate as South Africans and certainly as Africans.
All right, Dr. Buccas, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Really do appreciate your analysis.